Oklahoma looks to be loaded in 2021, but could NFL draft departures and the transfer portal muck up the situation? We got Jason Ray on the line from Last Word on College Football to check out the Sooners. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. Yeah, the transfer portal, it's the new age of free agency in college football. I saw it's kind of funny just thinking about how different this is. I saw a notification, there's a couple of accounts on Twitter that I know Rivals keeps track of it and 247 keeps track of it. So I had begrudgingly added notifications from a Twitter perspective just to see what came across. And today the big one was a deep snapper, the long snapper from Florida State. So that's where we are. I mean, just a microcosm of where we are from a transfer perspective. It's news of the day as a long snapper at Florida State is in the portal, but here we are.
Well, we've got our Florida State show actually going live here in 45 or 50 minutes, so we'll probably need to spend a good 30, 35 minutes on the long snapper. Charleston Rambo, though, maybe a little bit more prominent in college football circles. 25 catches, 3 touchdowns. Doesn't seem too productive, but 43 catches the season before and 5 touchdowns. Obviously limited games played. And the wide receiver room is being slimmed down by the transfer portal. And because of the way Oklahoma runs its offense, obviously the tight end situation also a bit of a concern, maybe on the surface. How do we stand there?
Yeah, so from a tight end perspective, 2 guys that really haven't played a lot of football for Oklahoma, specifically over the last couple of years. So Jalen Conyers, who was a true freshman this year, announced that he went into the portal along with Grant Calcaterra. Calcaterra is a little bit of an interesting situation. He essentially retired a year and a half ago because of ongoing concussion issues that he had during his time at Oklahoma. Then had a change of heart. Not sure what the decision making was there, but he had made a decision to enter the transfer portal with Oklahoma's depth at the tight end position. Really, at the time, he is on his way to Auburn, I believe, is where he made his declaration to. So he'll be moving on to Auburn. So yeah, it gives Oklahoma a little bit of a depth concern going into 2021. Austin Stogner is the guy that has played quite a bit here in his redshirt freshman year. Had a little bit of injury issues towards the end of the year with a bruised hip and a bruised thigh, I should say. And then he also had a staph infection, which was kind of bizarre that took him out for a few games. So I think another name to keep an eye on from a transfer portal, Eric Gilbert, is a guy that was committed to Oklahoma verbally for a while, switched over to LSU his true freshman year. He is in the portal as well. A 5-star tight end, very rare that you see a 5-star tight end out of high school. So that's a name to keep an eye on. A lot of people think that he could make that decision to come back to Oklahoma from an overall perspective as opposed to the verbal perspective. And then really kind of your question about Charleston Rambo, really it kind of an odd year for Rambo. To your point, what really came on last year in Jalen Hurts. I think he's one of those kids that really relies on a top-end receiver to pull away some of that coverage for him from a deep threat perspective. He really thrived with Jalen Hurts and, of course, CeeDee Lamb on the outside. This year, he was kind of asked to take an expanded role on the offense and be the guy. And he really kind of struggled with that. Only had, I believe you mentioned 25 catches this year. Really disappeared at times. Played a little bit better there in the bowl game against Florida. Had a couple of catches and a touchdown. But I think it's something that's really not too surprising from an Oklahoma perspective. Really kind of thinking about what they have back at receiver. Jaden Hazelwood will be back. He had certainly an injury riddled year with the ACL surgery. They have true freshman Marvin Mims that was here, who played really, really well. And then Trajan Bridges coming off the last part of the year, was suspended for a great part of the year. But should all 3 of those guys in the fold, along with Theo Weiss, has a good starting 4 right there. And I think from a recruiting perspective, who Oklahoma was able to bring in 3 4-star, and according to Rival, Mario Williams is a 5-star receiver. So the cupboard is certainly not bare, but I think it was really more of a testament from Rambo's perspective, just in terms of maybe not necessarily feeling like he would be a big part of the offense in 2021.
TJ Pledger stepped in for Kennedy Brooks and had more of a role with the team in his third season. 451 yards, 4.7 per carry, found the end zone, 9 touchdowns. But he's moving on. Talk about the running back position for 2021 and where the loss is there.
Yeah, I think really at this point, Mark, it remains to be seen how big of a blow that could be for Oklahoma. It could be pretty substantial. Kennedy Brooks has announced that certainly he was an opt out here in 2020. He has mentioned that he is going to come back onto the team for 2021. So that's certainly a help from a depth perspective. But Oklahoma losing out on Kamar Wheaton, who was a guy that was probably going to be in a position to at least get some playing time, maybe not necessarily an opening day starter as a true freshman, but certainly had the kind of talent that would make that a competition. So I think one of the big questions still remains is Ramondre Stevenson. Not sure exactly. He hasn't made a decision whether or not he's going to go ahead and go to the draft or come back for a year. Had a great Cotton Bowl against Florida. Almost 200 yards, showcased his talent. So if I were to guess, I think he probably would go ahead and move on, specifically because he's already a senior. So where does that put Oklahoma from a depth perspective? You got certainly you have Kennedy Brooks, who's probably going to be the number one guy, and I think Oklahoma fans were, I think, looking at that TJ Pledger moving on was really concerning. I think, at least from my perspective, the way that Marcus Major and the way that Seth McGowan ran in that Florida game was fairly good. It's something that I think Oklahoma fans will take to heart. Maybe the depth isn't quite as bad as it looked. Having said that, I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma looked either at the JUCO ranks from a recruiting perspective or at the transfer portal. A couple of names. One name specifically comes to mind. That's been a little bit of a rumor just in terms of Oklahoma may try to get in. Ty Chandler from Tennessee had put his name in the portal. And the name's escaping me right now. Running back from LSU that put his name. I've seen some speculation about him. The name's,
I believe Chris Curry might be.
Yeah, Curry. That's absolutely right. Yeah. So I think that's a little bit of concern from a depth perspective, but I think Oklahoma will make some sort of move if Stevenson doesn't come back, whether that be from the JUCO ranks or trying to see maybe what a good fit might look like from that transfer portal.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. This is what we do each and every day. Not just during the season, off season, May, June, whenever it is, 24/7, 365, talking college football with the likes of Jason Ray here from Last Word on College Football. So we would invite you to head on over to Last Word on College Football. You see it right there on the banner for extended coverage of the game we all love. And we're talking Oklahoma football. Please smash that like button, hit the bell for the notifications once you've subscribed, because we go live just about every day and many times, multiple times per day. The transfer portal is one issue. And then, of course, the NFL draft. And when you've got a program with the status of Oklahoma, there are possibly several departures that would be early entries. You mentioned Stevenson. Also on the other side of the football, when one name is brought up about the Oklahoma defensive resurgence, at least past to the sidelines with Alex Grinch actually on the field, Ronnie Perkins obviously made a huge statement this last 2 seasons in his play, and he's still weighing that decision.
Yeah, he is, and I think it's interesting both on the Stevenson and Perkins. They haven't made their decision yet. I think they have about a little bit over a week, January 15th. And you're right, he was really maybe the single biggest difference maker on that defensive side of the ball. Not necessarily him specifically, but the amount of attention that he demanded on that defensive line, was really good over the last half of the year. Everything that I'm hearing, it's kind of 50-50 right now. I think he's probably from a draft perspective, he's probably late third, early fourth. Not sure if that's enough to entice him. I think, there's a couple of things. He's really kind of a tweener from an NFL perspective, not quite big enough from a bulk perspective to be an inside guy from a defensive tackle perspective. And, has a little bit of work to do just from a pass rush skill perspective, just refining that skill. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think it's such a different proposition, Mark, for some of these kids. I think there's a couple of kids for Oklahoma that's went out early, have decided that is a little shocking. Trey Norwood, he decided to go. Trey Brown is another guy. Of course, Trey Brown was a senior. Norwood hasn't played a ton of ball, had an ACL injury last year, and then played a lot more this year, and really kind of solidified that back into the defense for Oklahoma, particularly there in the Cotton Bowl with a pick six. So those are a couple of guys that are going to be late, and maybe even undrafted free agents. So I think that it's kind of interesting that the thought process that some of these kids go through now, whether do I play another year in college, really, focusing on improving my craft while, gaining, wear and tear another year on the body, or do you make the jump, even if you might be an undrafted free agent, and then you're constantly working on your craft as opposed to, everything you have to do with school and things like that. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays, not only at Oklahoma, but the rest of the college football world. But I think, looking at Oklahoma's defensive line, who they have coming back, Isaiah Thomas was another guy that was possible. He's already said that he's going to come back. Nick Benito's another guy, one of the best pass rushers from a Pro Football Focus perspective, that all throughout the year, top 2 or 3, just in terms of his edge rushing ability. He hasn't officially come back, officially announced that he's coming back, but he has mentioned that from time to time, on just excited about the next year. So I think it's certainly pretty fair that he will be coming back. So the fact that Perkins still hasn't decided, I don't know that you make anything of that, but if he is able to come back, I think you probably have 6 or 7 guys among the front, the defensive line there, that will be probably 2nd, 3rd round draft picks. And I think it's a good problem to have, because that's something that Oklahoma hasn't had around that defensive line in years and years and years.
Benito led the team with 9 sacks, 11.5 tackles for loss. For Ronnie Perkins, these numbers are really outstanding when you consider his position, when you consider the attention that he was given throughout the season, as mentioned by Jason, and then also the time that he missed. He still got 10.5 tackles for loss and 5.5 sacks. Trey Norwood with those 5 interceptions, including the big one in the Cotton Bowl. Jason Ray joining us from Last Word on College Football to break down Oklahoma. Jason, I can't tell you that I may not be calling you again here in like 2 or 3 days. Who knows, with what we are calling free agency in college football, it just keeps humming along.
It's wild, Mark. I mean, I think we probably anticipated this being like this with the kind of the COVID year, with kids being able to come back for an additional senior year. But yeah, I think it's going to be one of those things that's going to be very interesting to watch throughout the throughout the last part of winter here, and then through the spring, to see how many of these kids decide to move around. I know it's an astronomical number already, specifically at the quarterback position. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that ebb and flow works throughout the college football community.
Jason, we always appreciate the conversation. Have a good one, and we will see you soon.
All right. Thanks, Mark.